Hello, welcome, everybody. We are going to get started in just a bit. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd like to see where everybody's coming from. We got some first emojis. Great to see you. Welcome to What's the Plan? It is Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, so you're in the right place.
Oh,
Nova
Nova
Scotia.
Scotia.
Wow, welcome, Nova Scotia. You're number two, along with New York. Great to see you.
Jasmine from Los Angeles. Let's see. Konya, North Carolina, Gaithersburg. Oh,
Napa,
we're going
West
too
Virginia,
fast.
Seattle,
Pomona,
Bloomington,
Brattleboro.
Minneapolis, Fresno.
Oh my goodness, it's too fast.
Missouri. This is, you know,
Tomo,
this is part of the experience of what's the plan.
Lexington, Studio City, Alexandria, South Haven. A lot of places. A lot of places.
Pennsylvania. We've got Rehoboth. We've been to Rehoboth. There's a great beach up in Rehoboth. Tucson, Arizona. Well, folks, we're just letting people us get in. We know there are thousands and thousands of people join in. Get a sip of your coffee, settle in. We're going to talk about how we defeat the fascists.
All right. Albuquerque, Pennington, New Jersey, Firecrest, Wisconsin, Washington, Silver
Oh,
Spring,
Austin, Texas, my hometown.
Hopewell, New Jersey, Newbury, Massachusetts. Let's see, a lot of Florida in the chat. Kauai, love that.
Why don't we get started?
Okay,
We've got a lot of
great.
content to get through.
Let's go.
So I think we should get in. Hey, everybody. I'm Ezra, and
I'm Leah.
we are the co-executive directors of Indivisible National. It is great to be here on a Thursday afternoon talking with a whole bunch of folks who want to save American democracy because we do too. And we have a theory for how you do that. This is why we gather every week. We try to come together to talk about what are the things we can actually do. This is called What's the Plan because we don't want to just absorb information about the political system and about how terrible everything that Trump and the MAGA Republicans are doing. We want to talk about what can we do about it. So that's the point of coming here. We've got some extra special content for you today. We never do this, but we have some slides. I know everybody's been on a lot of webinars. The last thing we want are more slides. We're not going to spend a ton of time, but we want to tease some of the training that's coming next week because we think it's really, really important for how we move in this moment. Uh, as everybody who is not brand new to Indivisible knows, we believe in organizing. That is the heart of what we do here. We believe that individuals in this country, unless you're rich or famous, have very little power, but all of us together actually have overwhelming power. And the way that we build that power is through local indivisible groups, of which there are around 2,500 now local indivisible groups, more than double the number as of the election. If you're brand new, I've been saying this for months and I can continue to say it. You are joining at a wave moment for pro democracy grassroots organizing. There are new indivisible groups who join every single day in blue states and red states and purple states, in rural communities, suburban communities, urban communities, all over. There is probably an indivisible group pretty darn near to you. If you haven't found yours, I would encourage you to find it. If there isn't one near you, congratulations, you can be a new indivisible leader. That's how this works. That's who leads these indivisible groups. Normally, I call out a handful of indivisible groups that have joined in the last week and talk a little bit about each one of them. We have so much to cover now today. What I'm going to ask everybody to do, I have a whole bunch of folks, about half of the groups I'm going to call out who joined, just a smattering from, I didn't want to duplicate states, but I wanted to give you all a sense of the breadth. So can I see some love in the chat and through the emojis for our new Indivisible leaders just in the last week? We've got Cynthia from Indivisible Hollister in California. We've got Meg from Helderberg Indivisible in Altamont, New York. We've got Ariel with Juneau for Democracy in Juneau, Alaska. Jennifer with Indivisible Bremerton in Washington. Mary with Indivisible Marshall County in Benwood, West Virginia. Brenda with Indivisible Griswold and North in Plainfield, Connecticut. Frank with Hope Indivisible in Hope, Arkansas, and Cindy with Indivisible Norman. I've driven through Norman in Oklahoma. Just to give you a sense, folks, this is just in the last week. This is about half or so of the new Indivisible leaders who have started new Indivisible groups. Like I said, red, rural, blue, city center, all over. People in this moment are seeing the overreach from the federal government. They're seeing the total lack of mandate for MAGA, and yet the intense agenda coming from these Republicans. And they're saying, what do I do? And they're getting involved. And that's what we need. Uh, I'm sorry to speed through all this, but we have a lot of, I think, really
Yep.
interesting, important content to get into because we want to pull everybody along together. We want us all to be on the same page. So before we get into some of that content, Leah, do you want to talk about the point of these calls? What are
Yeah.
we doing? The Q&A, how all this works?
Okay. All right, folks. If you've been here before, you know the drill. This is mostly Q&A, mostly live, some submitted in advance from group leaders in some cases. We have a very special session today because we have made slides. This is big. This is not something we normally do, but most of the conversation is still going to be Q&A. Now, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A function on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If you use the little thumbs up sign next to the questions, you can upvote the questions you most want to see. We're going to answer mostly off the top, although we'll try to like mix it up to make sure that there's a diversity of questions in there. Um, if you're from an Indivisible group, let us know in your question so that we can shout you out. Now, this will all be recorded. It will be sent out to everybody who registered. There will be links in the chat as we go. If you miss a link because the chat is moving too fast, as has happened in the past, don't worry, you will get it in the follow-up email. We are going to keep doing these conversations as long as people find them useful. People seem to find them useful. We keep growing every week, so we're going to keep doing them. Finally, we cover a lot of really hard stuff, and it is personal. It is really intense. There may well be, disagreements or strategic differences amongst us. That is okay. What we ask is that we all treat each other with respect and with care in the chat box. We are a nationwide movement. We got to organize together. We got to lean into solidarity even when it is tough. So that is what we're going to model collectively.
I have found these spaces to be a very respectful place. Like we don't always agree,
Yep.
but we're discussing big ideas, and I found it to be a really healthy place to actually get into real questions people have. So don't be afraid to ask critical questions. That's also okay. Nobody has all the answers here. We're trying to get into the real stuff. So speaking of getting into the real stuff, like I said, and like Leah said, we have maybe about 10 minutes of slides. So don't worry. This isn't like a long hour-long presentation, but we wanted to tease some of the training that is coming up next week because we want you all brought along with us and we want your help getting the word out that we need as many people getting acquainted with the principles of nonviolent non-cooperation as we try to push back against these authoritarians. Thanks to Lori and Jules for putting up the slides. Perfect timing. So I'll just start to say something about Indivisible's history. We started with this very clear idea of where we were going to push strategically. And it stemmed from this understanding of constituent power, that you, by virtue of being an American resident, you have constituent power because you are represented by a city council person or a state representative or a US rep or a senator, and they need your votes to get reelected. So the idea behind early Indivisible was organize locally, focus on your elected officials, and push them. You push them. You push them to be fighters. You push them to fracture for MAGA, or you push them out of office when you organize and elect somebody who's actually going to listen to you. So that identity as a constituent was core to just about everything we've done, and it's still quite important. Your identity as a constituent is still important for pushing your elected officials. And also, what we're saying here and the direction of the training that we're going to be bringing you all is to say it's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So let's go on to the next slide and say why. It's because we are followers of Maria Stephan and Erica Chenoweth and the other experts in authoritarianism. And we believe them and the other experts when they describe the period we're going through. And they describe it as a period of authoritarian breakthrough. This is described as a period of authoritarian breakthrough, not because it is a state that we are firmly in, but because it is a race that we are in, a race against time. The authoritarians are actively trying to consolidate power. They've got this short window to do so before public backlash prevents them from doing it. And if we organize effectively, we can push back against them. But it depends on us organizing against them. And it's not just about legislation. What brings us to the next slide. I told you we're going to go pretty quick. What it looks like is more than just bad legislation. Look, Republican presidents and Republican Congresses, they pass bad legislation all the time. That's not new. It's bad, it's not brand new. The scale of the reconciliation bill was egregious. That was uniquely bad. Some of the specific components of the reconciliation bill, though, point to what this authoritarian breakthrough looks like. Because it's not just that they're cutting Medicaid, it's not just that they're cutting taxes for billionaires, it's that they're also at the same time creating the largest federal enforcement agency in the history of the republic in the form of a secret police with ICE. They are breaking laws. They are engaging in unconstitutional behavior. And they're doing this to create this sense of inevitability, this aura of inevitability that Trump is today, Trump is tomorrow, Trump is forever, and God help anybody who stands up against them. It's not just bullying Republican members of Congress to go along. It's not just sidelining Democrats out of the legislative process. It's actually also moving outside of the bubble of Washington, D.C., and tackling alternative sources of power. Alternative sources of power. They're going at them and saying, you better not stand up to us either, otherwise, there are going to be consequences.
Yeah.
Leah, do you want to talk about what those alternative sources of power look like in our
Right.
country?
So, right, absolutely. So when we think about power, I think a lot of us sometimes think of it as the top down, right? Oh, there's the president, he gives orders, and that's what happens. But power is actually the interplay of a lot of different institutions, people, entities across society, either doing things or not doing things based on their own incentives, right? Each of the pillars that we've outlined here, these are different institutions within American society composed of different people, different organizations, different corporations, et cetera. They're all making decisions about how much they are going along with Donald Trump and how much they are standing up to Trump and the MAGA movement. And I want to say really clearly, there's a very important strategic reason why creating this aura of inevitability is so important for Donald Trump and for his people. It is because it is a lie. It is a lie. And if they get everybody in these pillars of support to believe it, then they have to do way less work because these folks will do the work for them. Now, go to the next slide. Okay, this is a slide that we pulled from our friends at Protect Democracy, and it talks about how exactly that lie works. It's the cycle of anticipatory obedience. So the idea here is that there are all these people, they're looking left, they're looking right, they're like, what do I need to do to be safe, to advance my own interests, to, do what I want under this new Trump regime? Donald Trump and his people, they use the power of government to retaliate and to threaten. That creates a climate of fear for everyone, and they preemptively start doing what they think the autocrat is going to want them to do. If you look at Jeff Bezos, if you look at Mark Zuckerberg, if you look at Target dropping its DEI policies, what you are seeing there is the cycle of anticipatory obedience. It's powerful people and institutions across society trying to fold in, trying to comply, trying to do what they think Donald Trump wants, or it's people who you might expect to speak out going silent because they don't want the brunt of that threat. They don't want to be the ones retaliated against next. Now, we can interrupt this cycle of anticipatory obedience. We have been interrupting this cycle of anticipatory obedience with our actions, and we can do more because reversing this is the key to reversing the broader authoritarian breakthrough process.
So,
Next
and
slide.
what that looks like, Leah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. Thanks, y'all.
All right. What does that look like? Okay. So we're going to reverse that sense of inevitability through mass, visible, sustained defiance. You all have already been doing this. Hands off and no kings were about punching through, creating the story that we were trying to tell, but also creating really clearly for everyone in American society the understanding that Trump is opposed everywhere, that the resistance is big, it is powerful, it is beautiful, and it is growing. But we are also going to organize strategically to pressure those pillars of support for the regime because each of those folks, the businesses, the higher education, the professional associations, they're all making decisions based on their own incentives. We can alter their incentives if we organize correctly to push them. And the way that we're going to do that in particular is looking at building out our capacity for strategic non-cooperation. That is a complicated set of words. You are going to have to join the entire training to hear more exactly about what it is or how it works. But the basic idea behind non-cooperation is the idea that you're not going to do something that the regime wants or expects or has directed you to do. That could look like artists refusing to play at the Kennedy Center because the Kennedy Center has been taken over by Donald Trump. It could look like universities saying, make me, when Donald Trump gives them an unconstitutional order on academic freedom. It can look like state governments saying, nope, we're not going to do that thing that you just told us to do. It can look like communities organizing and pushing businesses to push ICE out. All of those things are different examples of organizing to push people to not comply with the regime as it attempts to exert power over the rest of us. And so we collectively can tap into that ability, and we're going to learn how together.
That's right. So let me just close this out. I think there is a common misconception, not among this group, but I think about the broader public, even those that oppose Trump, that, gosh, how are you going to get tens of millions of people out to oppose this regime? Isn't it impossible? Like he won a plurality of the popular vote in the election. How on earth will we get tens and tens and tens of millions of folks? What we know from the experts in authoritarianism, I'm thinking specifically of Erica Chenoweth, is this 3.5% figure. Our folks, let me know in the chat. Are you familiar with the 3.5% rule? This comes from the expertise of folks who study how authoritarians are successfully pushed back against. What they find, looking all across the world and history, there's a lot of knowledge here, but I'll walk through it a bit. What they find is you don't need half of the population to stand up in a persistent way in order to prevent an authoritarian takeover. Actually, all you need is persistently engaged 3.5%. If you have 3.5% of the population persistently engaged, organizing locally, and pushing back against overreach, that's enough. That prevents authoritarian takeover. So this is the goal we have in our head. This is the goal we have in our head. We need to grow, but we don't need to grow by some unrealistically large amount. There were 5 to 6 million people out on No King's Day. That's about half of 3.5% of the population just on that one day. So when we started to plan for 1 million rising, this is the idea in our head. We need to get as many people acquainted with the basic idea of strategic non-cooperation and pull them into a combination of one, national campaigns that we're all going to throw in on, and also give them a framework for local and state level campaigns that you all can run with each other because it's going to be relevant in Arkansas or in California or in Texas, but not in all of those places. That is the purposes of this training, to train people up on how we actually do this in practical terms, and then to train trainers who can train their own communities. That's why we're calling it 1 million rising. We want to get 1 million people trained on this. And as Leah said, this is a tease, y'all. This is 7 slides. That's it. We're not covering the details. Do not tell our creative team. Leah and I threw these slides together ahead of this call. The real slides, the real training is going to be far better than this. We just wanted to give you a sense of what's coming, where our heads are, and allow you to ask some questions that could inform the training that's starting next week. So would highly, highly encourage you all to register for this. And my request to you is similar to the request we made of y'all in the lead up to No King's Day, which is there is no multi-million dollar budget for advertising 1 million rising. That doesn't exist. We don't have the money to do it. That's not how we work. What there are millions of people who are part of Indivisible who can, through word of mouth and their own networks, let people know, spread the word that this is happening. This is not just for activist types. This is not just for organizers. This is not just for community leaders. This is for everybody who is worried that Donald Trump is overreaching, that our democracy is facing a severe threat, and want to understand what they can do about it. Like I said, 5 to 6 million people out on No King's Day. Would love to train 5 to 6 million people on the principles of nonviolent non-cooperation. We're going to build towards it. People are asking how we sign up and where the links are. There will be a follow-up email to this. It's already out there. We've got Lori. Thank you. You put the link in there. Frankly, we finished this on around the same time line that we normally finish our normal openings, Leah. So we didn't even cut into Q&A too much,
That's great.
which is great. Appreciate y'all for bearing with us. I would also welcome feedback if you think slides are a pain and you don't like them, or if you found this helpful, because we can try to do more of this. We tried to get actually one expert to join us this week as a special surprise guest. They weren't available. We might do that again in the future too. Okay, Leah, any closing thoughts before we jump into Q&A?
No, it's great.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, and thanks for the positive
Also,
feedback.
actually, I will say, feedback is
Yeah,
welcome. If you're
feedback's
like,
very
I don't know what the heck that thing was, if you're like, various pieces of that landed for me, or if you're like, that just made me depressed and sad, that's actually good for us to know, because we are going to be delivering this to more and more people, and we're tweaking it as it goes for like how you deliver it within your own house party, your own community. So we want that feedback.
And both because it's new and frankly, it's more complex than yell at your member of Congress to not vote for this bill.
Yeah.
Like that is what our bread and butter has been for the better part of a decade, a relatively simple theory of change. The stakes are higher right now and the strategies are more complex. And that's the reality. But we want to pull as many people into it as possible.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for
To the
all the positive
questions.
feedback. That's great. Good to hear. And again, just to underline, we welcome critical feedback as well. That helps us grow. That helps us improve. Okay, first top question is Sue's, who asks, "What can we do to actively protest ICE on a more frequent basis? I really feel as if there were at least regularly weekly protests encouraged, similar to the Tesla takedowns, which tend to happen every Saturday, that people would show up." This is top of mind for us
Yeah.
right now, Suze. I don't know if you saw the newsletter that I sent out with the team on Monday. I think the most underreported part of the reconciliation bill is this creation of the secret police. I mean, we're talking the largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the Republic. The total spend for this is at the level of the Russian military. And 90% of the coverage has been, I think, reasonably on the egregious Medicaid cuts and the egregious tax cuts for the wealthy or the SNAP cuts. And that's bad. It's also, I don't believe, the first thing we're going to see out of this bill. The first thing we're going to see out of this bill are detention camps like at Alligator Auschwitz that's being constructed in Florida. We're going to see thousands upon thousands of ICE agents, probably a lot of Proud Boys applying for new jobs to become ICE
The
agents.
Proud Boy Full Employment Act.
And this is happening now, not sometime in the future, not after the midterms. Now we're going to see it. And if you think this is just about immigration, I'm sorry, you got another thing coming. They are using the secret police, yes, to focus on a more vulnerable part of society, but they're going to use it to bully their political opponents. They're going to use it to bully the press. They're going to use it to bully organizers. That is just authoritarianism 101. You don't create a secret police just to go after the most marginalized. You create a secret police to go after everybody who might oppose you.
Well, and I wanna pick up on that and note you strategically target a marginalized
Yes.
population that people, and not going to name any names here, but a lot of Democrats are afraid to stand up for or view it as politically unsafe to stand up for, so that you
John
can set
Fetterman.
John
We'll name
Fetterman.
some
Okay, we'll
names.
name some names.
Yeah.
John Fetterman. So you do that so that you can set the standards that you then use to apply to other people. And so I think we've got to really be clear when we talk about unlawful detentions without due process. When we talk about, as Ezra mentioned, the arrests of politicians, it's not an accident that whenever they are arresting a member of Congress or someone like Brad Lander in New York, it's in the context of immigration enforcement and protests against immigration. They've made an assessment that they can kind of crack the door open for super illegal stuff by justifying it in the context of immigration enforcement, but they're not going to keep that door open just for immigration enforcement. They are using it on all of us. So we got to treat this as a collective fight. Now, I just want to
Yeah.
answer the actual
Yeah, the
question.
actual question, right. That's
Because
where I
I
was
was
going to
just
push
stuck
us
on
to.
a soapbox for a really long
Yes,
time.
great.
So here's what I would say on this. I think the very first question is always going to be, have you done a Know Your Rights training, and are you connected with a local immigrant rights organization in your community? Because ICE, like, I will just say, I am not seeing a ton of signs that the individuals who work at ICE are super vulnerable to having a change of heart because someone is protesting them. I think we've got to actually figure out strategic, collaborative ways of organizing to support the communities that are under threat from ICE. And that starts by getting connected locally with folks who've got the ball, who know what to do, who know what ICE is currently doing in your community, and figuring out what kind of support, resourcing, volunteers, et cetera, they need. So that's the first piece, is just getting connected locally. The next piece is there's a real variety of different ways in which ICE can currently operate in communities, right? Does your locality have a 287G agreement, which essentially means that local law enforcement is cooperating with ICE? If not, good, organize to keep it that way. If so, organize to try to get it ended. These are like, if you are in a blue state, there are a bunch of different ways that your state legislature, your attorney general can be using their power to act as oversight for ICE. We came out this week with a resource talking about no mask, prohibitions on people representing federal law enforcement operating with masks, right? So, can you get your blue state legislature to ban masked enforcement and masked and unidentified enforcement? is your state attorney general using all the tools that they can? We'll pop those links in the chat, but I would say think about local support and organizing, and then think about organizing to push the formal political powers within your area right now, because those are two different ways that you can actually impede or you can actually directly relate to how ICE operates.
I think this is the front lines of the fight. I honestly do. I think there is a mix of, like Leah said, of legislative advocacy at the state and the federal level, and non-cooperation that I hope the trainings that we're doing will help to develop specific tactics that folks can implement on the ground to push back in an effective way. I think everybody saw what Trump did to LA, the terror that he wrought there across the LA communities and the militarization of the city. That if you had a question of like, why just LA? Why not many more cities? The answer is they didn't have the money. They wanted to do it in more cities. They didn't have the money. They've got the money now. So I would expect to see a replication of what we saw in LA, in Seattle, in Chicago, in New York, in Austin, in blue cities across the country. I think that's coming. And we need people getting real smart, real fast on how we can push back effectively.
And I just want to note from the chat, multiple folks noting that it is still ongoing in
Yes,
LA.
sorry.
So it's
Yes,
just,
yes.
not past tense.
So, Suze, I'm glad this was the top voted question. It's top of mind for us. Moving on to Catherine's question. My question centers on disillusionment of young adults. We've talked about the value of high-powered influencers, and as we look ahead to the midterms in 2028, I'm wondering if our movement has the resources to recruit star power who will not only endorse but make strong arguments for voting for what they think of as the lesser of two evils. My smart and kind-hearted nephew is in his 20s, who has long hated Trump, couldn't be persuaded to vote for Harris because he opposed some of Biden's policies. There are likely lots like him who would feel unethical voting for anyone to the right of, for example, Bernie Sanders. How can we get help reaching them? It's a great question. So, I have a few answers to this, and one I actually just want to call myself out because I got some healthy pushback to the on the last What's the Plan call. I think I was talking about Mondani's win and his run against, I think I used the phrase like crusty old establishment, which I think was taken as me like bashing like older members of the coalition, which is really not what I meant, but I understand how it could have been taken that way. There are incredible older members of our coalition. I would like Elizabeth Warren, would anybody accuse her of like not being a fighter for democracy? Markey in Massachusetts also not a fighter for democracy. Bernie Sanders, you mentioned. I think sometimes the press flattens this as it's the youngs versus the olds, and that's the fight here. I actually think it's more complex that it's how old are your ideas? Are you stuck in a former version of our political system, or do you understand the threats we're facing? And I think that is the dominant fight in our politics right now. Cuomo, I think, is a good example of somebody who views it as politics as usual. And Mondani, regardless of where you stand on his economic policies, understands that we're in a new political reality. And that so this is relevant to this question. So I apologize for I didn't want to offend anyone, and I actually don't even believe that too. Like I'll offend people if I believe it, but I don't intend to be offend people on that front. But Mondani, what I would say about him and the incredible campaign he ran is I don't know if people saw the youth turnout was bonkers, was absolutely bonkers for Mamdani. I think there's a sense that the youth just don't care about politics. That's impossible to get them out. And what his campaign showed that is it is indeed possible to excite young people, to get them out to vote. Folks are willing to believe in politics. It's possible to get young people to believe in politics, but just rallying around leaders who failed them repeatedly, it is going to be hard. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be hard. Chuck Schumer has a 17% approval rating. Congressional Democrats writ large have a 21% approval rating. It is going to get hard to convince young people that it could be worse, so you should show up. So one thing beyond just thinking social media, beyond just thinking influencers, one thing we could all do is ask ourselves, is the current slate of Democrats running in primaries, are they going to build a winning coalition? And if they are going to alienate parts of our coalition, whether that's people of color or immigrants or young people or any part of our coalition or moderate voters or former Republicans or never Trump Republicans, we should be asking this question, is this somebody who can build a winning coalition? And that includes youth. And I think a lot of folks, and I don't think it's just age, a lot of folks will not successfully do that because they are too stuck in the past. I don't believe this is particularly ideological. I have my ideological beliefs. I think it is more, though, about Do you think it's a crisis? Are you somebody who actually understands the problems that we're currently facing? Or are you just same old Democratic establishment type who is perceived to have failed us for many cycles? So I think that's a challenge to all
Yeah.
of us to demand a party that can win. And that does not mean just poll tested BS language that excites nobody.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think like the subtext I would just say I think that there's a real risk of treating this as kind of a marketing and messaging problem as
Yeah.
opposed to a substantive problem. Like I will tell you, we were part of I can tell from your description of your nephew a little bit what his political profile is. I can tell you we were part of conversations with the Biden White House from like very early on in the our in 2023 and 2024 being like your policies on Gaza are fracturing our coalition. They are damaging our ability to make a clear pitch about good and bad to young people who are looking at our pitch around the threat to democracy and saying what the hell is happening over here, right? So like I actually think that we've got to be real that we have to take head on the actual contradictions that young people saw and not treat that as a matter of messaging because fundamentally one of the things that young people are really good at is identifying hypocrisy and going in the other direction. And so
Yeah.
I really think that we've got to start by asking like what are people actually responding to? They are responding to candidates who have an affirmative vision. They are responding to candidates who are talking about the issues that they care about. They are responding to candidates who are not treating this moment as politics as usual.
Mm.
Those are the directions that we can go.
Yeah. And there are a lot, look, I think there are going to be a lot of healthy primaries out there. We get to ask this question, and we don't have to win all of them. We don't have to primary every candidate out there, and not every candidate out there incumbent deserves to be beat. There are a lot of good fighters in Congress, and we want them there. There are a lot of good city council people and state reps and senators who are on the right side of this. But there are also people who are just hanging on, who are supported by the powers that be to stay in those seats, and we shouldn't treat that as a foregone conclusion. I think we should ask ourselves, could we do better? Could we do better? And if we think we could, I think we should rally around better representatives. I think that will bring more people in and maybe get them to believe that there is possibility in politics and it's worth them engaging in voting.
We have answered two questions and it's
Oh
50 minutes,
gosh.
so we
Okay,
gotta get
sorry.
this
We're
done.
gonna go
So
faster.
we'll
We're
do
gonna
lightning rounds, y'all.
uh
Sorry.
we did, can I just say for Catherine's last answer,
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of interesting stuff on creators right now. We did really cool stuff on No
Yeah.
King's Day. We did some cool experiments where we invested in different firms that help us reach creators. We did at some point, I think I'll present this. We did fabulously well, and it's showing us in the direction of how to reach more diverse and younger audiences. So, Catherine, for that part of your question, it's not like I'm saying we shouldn't do any of that outreach. I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's the whole shebang. I think we got to do more. Okay. Right, you are, Leo. I'll try to go faster. Okay, Mark asks, doesn't the Federal Supremacy Clause override any state prohibitions against ICE agents wearing masks?
So we're digging into this question right now. I think there's definitely been some pushback on that front, and we're looking into like what versions of this would be able to be moved. But also like make them make that case. Part of the thing that we need to do right now is blow up the understanding collectively that this is happening, right? Because this is a great example of like a rampant and horrifying overreach that when people hear about it, they're like, oh, I don't want that. In the same way that with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, people may not be clear on every individual twist and turn, but they're really clear on the idea that they don't want people kidnapped and taken to a torture gulag without due process. People might not be clear on everything about immigration enforcement, but they're really clear if you explain it to them that masked guys, anybody can throw on an ICE costume they bought from Amazon, impersonate an ICE officer, and go around kidnapping people is a really, really, really bad and dangerous idea and state of affairs. And so part of what we're trying to do is establish for the general public the extreme degree to which these folks are operating with no accountability, with no checks and balances, with total impunity for the actions that they are creating and the harm that they cause. And so every day that people are hearing more stories about Donald Trump saying, why, yes, I totally do have the right to send out masked men to do whatever the heck they want in your communities, is a day that we are reaching more people.
Indeed. There's just this conception that immigration is a bad issue for us and a good issue for MAGA or Republicans, and that's not what the evidence is this year. Abrego Garcia was terrible for Republicans, as much as they thought it was smart for them. LA has not worked out for Trump and Republicans. When we stand up for principle, when we stand up for due process, when we stand up for the Constitution, we actually win. It is the morally right thing to do, and it is politically advantageous. Win-win. We should just push on it. Okay, next question is from Sherry. Oh, from Sonoma County Indivisible. There is an Indivisible via Mobilize Activist Hour on Zoom on Sunday evenings. The leader suggested that we register with Elon Musk's New America political party as he feels it will pull votes away from MAGA. I believe this to be a huge mistake along the lines of Kennedy running independently to pull votes away from Kamala Harris. Not only that, he has taken access to our private information, and since he was Trump's sidekick for, oh, Elon has, yeah, Musk has, since he was Trump's sidekick for quite a while, I'm sure that he too has rubbed shoulders with Putin. What's your take on this? Well, I mean, Musk is a white ethno-nationalist. He has given Nazi salutes. I don't know if people are watching the newest developments of Twitter. I guess they call it X now, where Grok, their AI, is now calling itself Mecha Hitler because the gloves are off and he's going to be real and he's not going to be all PC. So I think Elon Musk is a bad guy, and this is a case where the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. It is not, there's not some kind of coalition I can
Yep.
build with Elon Musk here. And I don't know politically if he will fizzle out and not actually do anything. Like Musk is on ketamine half the time it seems, or he's like not trustworthy when he makes commitments. So I would take with a grain of salt his threats that he's actually going to move forward with this. And even if he does, I think it would be a distraction for us.
Yeah.
We should be focused on building the majority coalition against the techno fascists and the MAGA fascists and the people who are terrorizing your communities because the majority of the public is on our side when it
Yep.
comes to that. So I think this is frankly I think it's too cute by half. I wouldn't
Yeah.
play this game. I would focus
Yeah.
on honest organizing on the ground because I think that's where we build real power.
Yeah, the only like I would say in general, we've seen a lot of ideas for kind of like third parties that get too cute by half and
Yeah.
don't actually like have the legs and traction to move in any meaningful direction. And generally speaking, your time is best invested in building our movement rather than messing around with that stuff.
Great. SL asks, the U.S. is funding and implementing concentration camps and ethnic cleansing both domestically and abroad. What's the plan to stop this? It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the short answer is that we have to build the political power to interrupt the consolidation of authoritarianism in this country, and we have to build the political power to reclaim to reclaim and to ensure a democratic transition to political leaders that we can trust and who will have policies that actually take us forward and that, are the absolute reverse of what Donald Trump is doing in every possible fashion, right? We have ahead of us a massive process of both building our own political power, winning elections, ensuring that the results of those elections are respected and adhered to, and ultimately pushing to build the kind of political movement that sees a democratic transition. And I wish that the answer was that we could, pass one piece of legislation. I wish that the answer was that we were going to be able to simply, to work our way out of any of the harms that that are happening via something simpler, but the short answer is, and so much of the theory of change that we have here is that we have got to build the political power that is necessary to make them back off the most horrible things that they are doing and to ultimately force or ultimately win a change in political power.
That's right. There's no shortcut. Ginny asks, new ways to resist. How do we fight back when we are constrained by laws and rules and the opposition is not? I'm concerned that the speed of their destruction is far outpacing our slower, deliberate organizing. Are the tried and true methods sufficient to meet the urgency of the moment? I mean, you're hitting on one of the principles of nonviolent organizing. And it's not that through virtue by virtue of getting a lot of people together and marching across Edmund Prez Bridge, John Lewis was able to tell the powers that be in the South that, oh, you should listen to your better angels and not be so damn racist. That's not what happened. It was that the vicious forces in the segregationist South overreacted to seeing people march, overreacted to seeing peaceful protests, and in overreacting, it generated more sympathy by the up to that point not active public, and that not active public became more public or became more active and more supportive of changes that were necessary. The reason why we engage in nonviolent protests is both because we believe in nonviolence morally, but also because we believe it is strategic. This is how you stand up against a force that has monopoly control of force in the country. That's how you effectively do it. This is from lessons all across the world and all across history. This is how you organize in this situation. It's not to act as if Trump is going to follow the rules. It's actually based on this fundamental idea that Trump, in breaking laws, in acting in unconstitutional ways, is not doing so out of a position of strength or security, but out of weakness and fear. And that the majority of the public will not support that. And when the majority, or 3.5% of the majority, stands up and says, we're not going along with this, it's unsustainable on his end. Gene, oh, like Leah, anything else
No,
on that?
that's
Sorry.
it.
Okay. Gene asks, from Necessary Trouble, Georgia. Oh, appropriate given John Lewis Day coming up next week. Gene from Necessary Trouble, Georgia Indivisible. Our next mobilization should be a day of volunteer action like many groups do for MLK Day. Things like working at a food bank, cleaning up a park, helping food flood victims, etc. Funny you should mention that, Gene. I was just seeing Baton Rouge Indivisible posted to me on Blue Sky that they're doing a food drive on the John Lewis Day, on Good Trouble Lives On Day, which is next Thursday. That's one of the actions that they're engaged in. I think this is a great idea. I think this is a great idea, and that's coming up on Thursday. So there are going to be a lot of different kinds of events coming up. I think some people are going to do vigils, some people are going to do marches, some people are going to do protests, some people are going to do mutual aid and food drives. And I think showing up in your community in this way is an excellent way to build that community and demonstrate that you're not just marchers, you're not just political advocates, you're actually folks who care about your community. We've seen indivisible groups do a lot of that. Leah, do you want to talk about mutual aids?
Well, yeah. So I would say, first of all, absolutely. And this is I can't commit to what a national next day of action is. We got a lot to do on a bunch of fronts, but in general, I think this is a really healthy and important place for indivisibles to be digging in and to be thinking about what they can do. We actually are working on our campaign side around. In addition to the Solidarity and Action training series, which we launched earlier this month, which is focused on the practical skills and the grounding that is necessary to show up in solidarity with communities under threat. We're actually going to be launching a set of micro grants for solidarity in action grants and training around how do you do local solidarity based organizing, how do you do local mutual aid organizing, trying to help folks think collectively about how do we build those ties on a local level. Now, I also think these are not, one or the other, right? Because
Yeah.
like the kind of aid and the kind of community support that we're doing right now, we are filling massive gaps that have been left by this assault on the federal government, this assault on all kinds of funding streams for everything from homeless shelters to domestic violence shelters. We're actually stepping into places where folks are under threat. And we should be really clear about the fact that the government has stepped back because of Donald Trump's policies, because of Elon Musk's Doge. We actually, we can make the political connections as we do this work.
Mhm.
Now, I actually, on that note, I do want to make sure to plug that we've got our second Solidarity in Action training series coming up in just next week. Actually, this time next week, this is going to be a messaging and framing training. We have our dear friend Anat Shenker Osorio, who is, many folks will know, is a messaging expert extraordinaire, has worked with movements all over the world. And she's going to be talking to us about how we do race class narrative framing in our own messaging so that we are doing inclusive messaging that brings everyone along with us. We will try and pop that link in the chat. Oh, I see it's in the chat. Fabulous. Sign up
Thanks,
if you
Lori.
haven't already. Anat is always a really fascinating conversation.
Oh yeah, she is such a great presenter and full of
Mhm.
like very
Yep.
specific, practical takeaways from the polling and the message testing
Yep.
and the work she does. Okay, Denise asks, what can we do about Stephen Miller? According to the article in the New York Times, he's running the show at the White House. We've seen a lot of that. Stephen Miller is one of the chief villains. I put him and Russell Vogt like somewhere in the same category
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
architects of the horror that we're seeing coming out of this
Yeah.
administration.
He's meaner on Twitter though.
That's
So
right. Russell
on
Vogt's
X.
quieter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russell Vote's quiet. He's under the radar.
Thoughts? We've talked about Stephen Miller a fair amount. To what
Yeah.
extent is he a useful villain publicly? How much should we be focusing on him versus others? Is there anything we can do to fracture the relationship between him and Trump, like we helped fracture the relationship between Musk and Trump? Leah, you've shared some thoughts before on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, so I think Stephen Miller is absolutely like a name and a face that is useful to center in our own messaging because he's just like kind of an appalling, horrifying human, and every normal human has an instinctive reaction of horror when they hear more about him. So that's all positive. I do think it's a little different than the Elon Musk Trump relationship. Elon Musk was a alternate power center, right?
Yeah.
It is an alliance between the richest man in the world who brings all this kind of additional power to the table with the president. And part of our strategic analysis at the beginning of this year was it was incredibly important to either fracture that relationship or to create a massive political cost for the continued affiliation. And so that's where a lot of the logic around protesting Elon Musk came from specifically, and making him a core story was making him, making him want to pull back, making Republicans want to pull back, etc. That doesn't necessarily apply for Stephen Miller. He is a creation of MAGA. He is a tool of MAGA. He is fundamentally someone who's just a very smart implementer of the MAGA agenda. So I'm not necessarily sure that it's quite the same in terms of like the goal and the campaign should target him specifically.
Yeah. I'm loving the variety of questions, and now I think we're picking up speed, so we're gonna try to go faster while speaking at a reasonable pace. Jim asks, given the draconian cuts in the BBB are deceitfully planned to take effect in the next Congress, how do we keep the low information voter from being lulled into believing that the bill was not so bad? Great question, Jim. And for folks who aren't fully tracking this, this was a smart thing that the Republicans did in this bill. A lot of the cuts, especially the cuts to Medicaid, that are most egregious do not take place until after the 2026 midterms. And they did that precisely for the reason Jim says, because they didn't want people understanding how bad this bill is. And until something actually directly impacts you, it's all hypothetical. And you're unlikely to bake that into your decision to vote or your decision on who to vote for. That said, a lot of the bad stuff is going to start pretty soon, Jim. A lot of the bad stuff is going to start pretty soon.
Yeah.
So I think it is up to us to draw as clear a line as possible between what the Republicans and Trump have done and why your life is worse. Headed in for the next 16 months, we should not simply move on from the reconciliation bill. And I hope when we're
Yeah.
talking about these conditions for courage and the pillar of support and this other work we're doing, I hope you don't think we're ignoring what Congress is doing. That is not it. We will be trying to hold Republicans accountable and make as clear as possible the damage that's being done. But so just want to preface that with that. Their hospitals are going to close between now and the midterms. We're going to see people's Medicaid will be impacted, people's SNAP will be impacted, people's premiums will go up, people will lose support from the advanced premium tax credit, not for Medicaid, but for the non-Medicaid federal support for health insurance. There's going to be a lot of bad stuff that comes out over the course of the next 16 months. And that's not even beginning to talk about the mass deportation secret police force that is going to be roaming the countryside all across from every state from now until election day. So I think you're pointing at something really key. We need to do as good a job pointing out what's wrong with this bill as the Republicans do trying to talk about all the great things in it because they're going to go and try to sell it. They're going to spend a lot of money trying to sell it. You're not being taxed on tips anymore. Congratulations, yay. We've got these Trump accounts where $1,000 gets deposited. That's why we cut, and forget about the Medicaid. We'll deal with that later, but at least you're getting this. The Republicans are going to try to sell it. And anytime there's a piece of good news out there, they're going to say that's because of our legislation. I think there's going to be a lot of bad economic news, and so it's up to us to say that's not random. That's not
Yeah.
just the weather. It's not naturally occurring. You are suffering now because of what the Republicans are doing. And case in point, this past weekend, I saw far too little of it. The floods in Texas, not so far away from where I grew up in Texas, which are horrific, that appear to have killed dozens of people. This isn't some random event. This isn't just the weather. Floods do happen in Texas. That's the weather. But the state and federal response, is it any freaking coincidence that Doge gutted the federal government, that the state of Texas has declined to invest in any kind of emergency infrastructure? And as a result of that, there's flash floods that we do not respond to. Flash floods will happen. It is government's job to be there to protect the people. And it's the feds and the MAGA state governments that are systematically endangering the residents of this country and those states. We have to call that out, though. Because if we don't call that out, nobody's going to make that connection. It's up to all of us to make these connections, though.
100% agree. And I hesitate to follow that,
Oh,
but I do just want to add one specific point and like hone in on one specific point that Ezra made, which is that while the Medicaid cuts do not formally kick in, a bunch of things that kick out, a bunch of things that screw up various beams of the healthcare system are going to happen immediately, right? So a lot of people will preemptively make decisions in advance of those Medicaid cuts in ways that will screw up our healthcare. The exchange tax credits for states that have their own exchanges are going to go away immediately. Hospitals are going to start feeling impact immediately. As far as any of us are considered, Trump just broke the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Like it's
That's
Trump
right.
care.
That's
They
right.
just made a massive set of reforms to the healthcare system that made care more expensive and less accessible for all of us. And every single thing that you experience going forward, part of the reason why is because Donald Trump broke the healthcare system. And so I don't think we have to get super complicated
That's
about
right.
this. Like
That's
they
right.
made massive reforms, it destabilized our system. A lot of things are worse as a result.
And just so y'all know, we're actively talking about this internally about how to do a better job creating the rapid response materials to give to indivisible groups and leaders and you all, so that when something like like they're reporting that premiums are going up, or they're reporting that hospitals are closing, or there are floods that happen, and there's a poor response as a result of cuts from Doge, we have immediate talking points out there to get to you all. So it's an active part of the conversation. It's not just us. It's like a movement-wide conversation. I think it's a really important part of what we do over the next 16 months.
Yep.
Jeff Kidder, great question. We've been discussing this internally
Yeah.
too. Where should quote unquote shot calling for 1 million rising actions live? A purely grassroots bottom up model risks uncoordinated, hard to vet efforts, while top down approach may be slower and less tuned to local realities. How do we strike the right balance? I
That's a
love
great
this question.
question.
It's such a great question. It's something we've been wrestling with too.
And the answer is both and.
Yeah.
We're actually going to have some specific things coming out of 1 Million Rising that are going to be national campaigns that we can all collectively throw in on. And we're also going to be embedding in the training the tools to develop and build your own campaigning plan in relation to institutions that you are have leverage in or that you are local within. And so the basic idea is we want to collectively throw in on some things together, and we want to give you the tools to say, this church, that local business. These are the places where I can have an impact that I know about, that like National Indivisible certainly is not going to be able to tell me what to do.
Hmm. Uh, and we're gonna have to this is somewhat experimental too.
Right.
We're gonna have to figure out what works, and some stuff is gonna catch fire. They were like, "Oh, we're surprised that caught fire," and then we should jump on it. We should do that. No Kings Day. How do we come up with No Kings? It came from the streets. We
Yep.
didn't like cook that up ourselves. We saw it on signs in the earlier protests at
Yeah.
5051 protests and hands
5051.
off.
Yeah.
And it was great, and it took off, and it was organic. We've got to be attuned to what's actually catching fire, and try to
Yeah.
build on what works. Um, Andrea or Andrea asks, please advise how and to whom to make suggestions about the next national protest. Indivisible, the Women's March, Red, White, and Blue. Who? The next national protest should not be in city centers or streets or parks. It should be right in the front of all Republican House members' local offices in every state. We have midterm elections coming up. We have to start making noise about them. But we need to do it together for one big national protest day. Call it Vote Blue No Matter Who protest, or SCOTUS would be good also. Thoughts on the next big? So
Let me
yeah, go ahead.
I feel like I want to like talk a little bit about like why we do protests and kind of like how we get
Great,
to the
great.
messaging and the strategy behind them in order to respond to the question. So, a protest, let's put it this way. If we all go out and protest in the forest and nobody hears or sees us, did we have a protest, right? And so
Don't protest in the
don't
forest.
protest in the forest, y'all. That's if you take nothing else away from this conversation, don't protest in a forest. But unless there's like whatever. Anyways. So
We're doing it live.
uh, so we want to design protests in a way where, we've got a theory of like why we're doing it, who we're trying to hit with our messaging, and those things all line up with the actual messaging. And so No Kings and Hands Off, those were both intended to be short, punchy, very clear story, activates a clear emotion, right? Hands off, it's loss aversion. Stop taking my stuff. No Kings, it's like you're not the boss of me. We don't have kings in America, right? Each of those is designed to be understandable immediately and to be relevant to people who aren't already with us, right? Because nobody wants their services cut. Nobody wants a king. Um, we want to continue to have the framing of the protests reach out to people who are not already convinced, right? And so we want it to focus on things that they care about, values that we share, ways in which we're kind of continuing to drive home messages that bring people into that big tent anti-authoritarian coalition. So that's one piece of this is that like the way that we're going to kind of orient the protest is really about reaching a broader population of people, both the people who could come out and the people who are going to see coverage of that. Our current assessment based on everything that we see, and you know, we talk about this in the training at the beginning, is Republican members of Congress, when we're protesting them at this point, it is primarily about the message it is sending to other people rather than the message that it is sending to them specifically, because
That's right.
they have decided what we are seeing from this reconciliation bill is they have decided that they are more scared of Donald Trump than they are scared of Democratic accountability right now. That is the implicit message of their votes for these massive Medicaid cuts, because anybody who's thinking about their reelection first and foremost and about their constituents organizing in their area is going to be like, hell no, get me away from that bill. So our targets are going to be people who could come to the protest and people who might hear about it and think, yeah, I agree. I think I'm with those folks. They are making sense. It's not necessarily going to be the actual, you know, elected enablers of the MAGA agenda. And so that influences where we're going to choose the venue, and it influences what kind of messaging we're going to use because we want to reach those people first and foremost.
Hmm. Actually, do you want to talk though about the July 26th? The July 26th?
Yeah, well, actually, let's just recap what
Yeah,
we've got coming
coming
up.
up. Yeah,
Okay, July 16th, July 16th or
17th.
17th, sorry. The John Lewis Good Trouble Lives On days. All right, I
A
know
week from
a
today.
week from today. Yes. All right, pop, emoji or put yourself in the chat if you are hosting or attending one of these events.
We will be out
We'll
there.
be out there.
And let me say, I've seen in this chat, hey, what about a general strike? And we say all the time, we are building the power necessary to mobilize at strength for something like a general strike. And I also see, but this is a Thursday. How can we show up on a Thursday? Y'all, if we can't show up on a Thursday, we can't have a general strike. We've got to learn how to organize on a Thursday. I know it's not, it'll be harder. And also, resisting fascism is hard. We are going to try to be good partners to Transformative Justice Coalition to all of the partners who are leading this. And we're going to show up. Leah and I will be out there. I hope you all will be out there as well.
So that is July 17th. July 26th, Families First mobilizations will be happening all over the country. These are mobilizations focused on the cuts that have been moving through Congress via the reconciliation bill, focused on the impact that that will have on families, focused on everything from Medicaid to SNAP. These are going to be in partnership with the Care Can't Wait Coalition, with our friends at Move On. A lot of folks mobilizing to really bring home that family-centered story of the harm that is being done via this legislation. So those are two mobilizations that are coming up shortly. Mark your calendars.
The the other thing I would just relevant to Andrea's question, the other thing I would mark your calendars for, if you were interested in highlighting the damage that your Republican representative or senator has done, after July is August recess. Now, Lee and I are former
Wow.
congressional staffers. Congressional staffers love August recess because the boss goes away. They go back home for
Unless
a
you happen
month.
to staff the town halls, in
And
which case you did not love August
we
recess.
we have both staff town halls with tea partiers. That's not the most fun thing to do. But the boss is home. So probably your member of Congress is going to be somewhere back home in the district. It is a good opportunity to have effective local tactics, putting pressure on them, not allowing them just to go to fundraisers or kiss babies at parades, but highlighting exactly what they've done to endanger our democracy and our communities. So pay attention to where your elected officials are during August recess. And there will be more planning headed into August recess, but I just want to put that on everybody's calendar that that's coming up throughout the month of August. They should be out of DC and back home in district.
Okay.
Next
We have
question.
time for one more.
Reba asked, the far right have soaked politics with faux religion. The border czar told the people to mind his business, but has bragged about being Catholic. Any ideas or knowledge or opinions of how to directly urge the Pope to excommunicate Vance and Holman? I'll just give the Pope a call. Should be easy.
If anyone's got it, if anyone has the Pope's number, let us know.
Please do.
Yeah.
Technically, you can't get to heaven if you're excommunicated in the Catholic Church. I'm not religious, but I think it send a loud message. So I don't have a specific answer to this, Reba, except to say we polled all of you after the last call asking which of the institutions that you belong to or have some connection to would you be interested in organizing to push? Overwhelmingly, 70% or so of y'all said, I would love to participate in some sort of economic institution focused campaign. So that could be a boycott, that could be pushing local businesses. So this is one of the things that's feeding into our strategy. Relatively high on the list, though, was religious institutions. Folks who are members of some faith tradition want to figure out how to organize where they are and push for their own institution to take firmer stances. I think that's great. I think there's opportunity there. It's one of the places we're exploring. I didn't see anybody fill out the survey saying they had the Pope cell, but I can go back over the survey
I need to start
results.
that list now. And just to go back to the, we're going to talk about this in the context of the non-cooperation training, but religious institutions are really crucial for either kind of giving cover to the ravages of authoritarianism or calling them out and exposing them in moral terms and reaching populations that we might not have the reach to do with authority, moral authority that we might not have. And so this basic question of how do you organize within your religious institution, right? Within your synagogue, within your church, within your mosque, like that actually is a really crucial way to move more people onto the field in this push for democracy.
Can we end with Ken's question just because it comes from an Indivisible group,
Hmm.
and I want to call out. So Caldwell's Indivisible is wrestling with a very common problem
Yeah.
among Indivisible groups. So Ken writes, Caldwell, Indivisible group in New Jersey encompasses several suburban communities, some of which lean Democratic, others Republican. Given that context, do you have suggestions for how our messaging to have the most impact in generating more anti-MAGA interest and turnout, more residents at rallies and other events?
Mm.
I think you're asking the right question, Ken, because we're not looking for everybody to just say the right lefty talking points or anti-Trump talking points and assume that that's going to play out the exact same way in every community. Organizing in San Francisco should look different than organizing where you are in New Jersey. You are going to be in a good position to craft a message that's better focused on what's exciting people in your area. What are people worried about? The unfortunate reality that makes for simpler messaging for your own community is much of what Trump is doing right now is deeply unpopular. It's deeply unpopular. That goes for the immigration provisions in the reconciliation bill. That goes for the Medicaid cuts, which have a 15% level of support in any congressional district. Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, Lauren Boebert's
Yeah.
district,
Yep.
supports cutting Medicaid by 15%. Tax cuts for billionaires are also very unpopular. And as Leah said, the coming disruption to the healthcare industry is not going to be popular also. Now, the way you frame that might be different based on where you are. It could be like, yeah, I understand voting against the status quo. I understand how you might not trust the Democratic Party, but look at what this Yahoo is doing. Look at what this guy, these clowns who are self-enriching and making all of our lives worse. They sold us a bill of goods. Look, they promised lower egg prices. They promised us a better society. Instead, they're getting tax cuts, and the rest of us are suffering. So I think you should tailor it for your own community, but I wouldn't be scared about going directly at this administration and this agenda. It's not popular. Republicans don't like it either. So I think we are on offense when it comes to pushing back against this agenda. And that offense will look different in San Francisco than it looks like in some redder districts.
That's a great note to end on, I think. Actually, I will end by asking, can you just give me an emoji if you are going to be attending the 1 Million Rising training next week? A happy emoji? Okay. Hello. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of people in the chat.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Great way to
Great.
finish, Leah.
Great. Okay. We will see you there.
We will see you next week, both for What's the Plan on Thursday, also for the Good Trouble Lives On protest on Thursday. The day before that, Wednesday, is the first of these 1 Million Rising trainings. We will keep building. Thank you for being here. We will see you again next week. I will just end to say there are more of us than there are of them. We have more emojis in our coalition than they have actual activists on the ground. They cannot sustain this assault on our communities and on our democracy. They cannot if we get organized. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to organize. That's the plan, y'all. We'll see you next week.